Welcome to Life on Mars, the MarsBased podcast where we talk innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. I'm really delighted to bring you our latest guest for tonight. We'll have Pieter Omvlee, one of the co-founders of Sketch, the design application we use in MarsBased. You might use in your companies, or you might not. Then better go get it and start using it. Welcome to the show, Pieter. Pieter, how are you doing?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
There's one thing, you recently celebrated 10 years, right? I know that the company is a little bit longer, or perhaps you had been working longer on the product. You launched in 2010, and congratulations on that. What can we expect from Sketch in the months ahead before we go into the history of the company? That's something we want to talk about today.
We're working on a lot of things for the end of the year. We have an update coming up any day now, which is probably out by the time we talk. 69, where we're introducing a few exciting things. We have, of course, Apple's upcoming release with Big Sur and the big visual redesign, and we're hard at work on that as well. When that will ship, who knows? Apple surprises us at the last minute usually. And we're working on some pretty exciting features for the app itself. We're hoping to launch collaborative editing before the end of the year. So we have a busy couple of months ahead of us.
You got a busy schedule, and I'm really excited to see about the new changes coming up. Let's go to the very beginning. What we're going to talk today is mostly how to keep the love alive with your co-founder and with your team after so many years, after experiencing growth. You guys also raised investment. We're going to cover all of this throughout the years. Let's start from the very beginning. You met your co-founder, but actually you didn't meet in person after the launch of the product, right? You had been working for a while. How did that come about?
Yeah, no, that's true. We met a couple of months after we launched that version of Sketch that we worked on together, and that was just because we were both flying to the US and said, well, it makes sense to meet up somewhere before we get on the plane. We worked together for I think at least a year before we saw each other in person, and just back then I was working from London. He was and still is based in Portugal, and we just connected over, I think back then it was called iChat. We just talked like that. Lots of texting, lots of exchanging images, and we just started working together. Yeah, I got in contact with Emmanuel through another designer I worked with before that on another app I built. And that designer, I had never met either. We built that app together. We launched it. He went off to Apple. I was looking for a new designer because of that, and he said, "Hey, let's go have a chat with Emmanuel. I think you two would like each other." And that's how we met. Never meeting in person.
But it seems to me it's a very, very similar relationship or story to the one of Basecamp, right? Where the co-founders of Basecamp, they started collaborating in the design agency they had, 37 Signals. And then eventually, VHH turned out to be the CTO, but they had never met in person, right? They would just work remotely and asynchronously. And that's sort of what defined the culture. Is that also what happened with you? Like, I know you guys are extremely friendly to remote. You're all remote, actually. And so did this initial relationship define the foundations of your company culture with regards to the remoteness of the company?
Absolutely. We just started working on what would become Sketch because we had this idea and he had a problem that he needed solving. And so we thought, well, if it's him, there might be others. But we didn't really start with some big grand master plan. Let's build a big company around this. We had no idea how the application would do. We just thought, well, let's make this app, and maybe this app will be a success, maybe not. If it's not, we'll just work on another app or we go our separate ways. So we never really were at that moment where it's like, okay, we're going to do this big thing and we're going to go into a place and we're going to open an office and we're going to start hiring people. That was never part of the plan. We just started working together. And when Sketch had launched and it's became clear that this was not like the other apps I had worked on. Well, we were in separate countries, and so okay, we needed someone to help us with support. So we found someone there, and we needed an extra developer, and we found them there, and sort of at no point were we like, okay, we need to rethink what we're doing. We need to find a location, open an office, get everybody there. And so sort of the remote culture sort of happens bit by bit. And before we knew it, we were that kind of team. And okay, we're a remote company now. This is apparently the way we are. So it's a lucky accident, and I'm very happy it happened this way. But I can't claim that it was a deliberate thing on our end. It just happened.
Before we go into the remote part, which is extremely interesting, for instance, at MarsBased, we're extremely remote. We don't have an office, never had for the 7 years of the company, right? But there's a question. Like, I've read different approaches to how you started the company, right? Because you say that you didn't do market research,
Indeed,
but you did have a vision, right? Photoshop was being marketed as the design tool for professionals, while you wanted to make it accessible to everyone. So it seems to me that there was some vision. It was not market research. So would you say that perhaps the evolution of the product, the conception evolution of the product, was more gut-based than perhaps business-driven?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. We both had a number of years experience prior. Me just working with various designers over the years, working on different apps. They all used Photoshop. They sort of uniformly complained that it wasn't really doing what they wanted it to do. Of course, Emmanuel himself, he had deep knowledge and experience of Photoshop. Didn't like it, but knew plenty of other designers in the community who felt similarly. So we both sort of had this idea, like there must be a better way to do this. We have ideas, and we know other people. And so if we know other people and we don't know that many people, there's probably something here. So and that was sort of the extent of our quote unquote market research.
Yeah, and you, like, entrepreneurship sometimes is advertised to the rest of the world as an ABC book, right? Oh, you got to do this, find a technical co-founder, then somebody who knows about fundraising, raise a fund, prototype, build a prototype, go to find a product market fit. Then once you hit it, then VC and go big and blah, 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 right? And it's kind of like an ABC, but it seems to me that you guys, although you've been extremely successful and you're being successful so far, is that you've done things always differently, just not because you've read them in a book, right? So the fact that you started with a co-founder you had never met before, that you were entirely remote, that you had no office, your tech stack is pretty interesting as well. It's not really common with the way that I've seen there's a lot of functional programming in your tech stack, for instance, and like a lot of things, or the fact that you had been self-funded and bootstrapped for many years before you raised the investment, right? How did you know what was the right thing to follow, and how hard was it to actually avoid following the book that other companies were following?
Well, we're both pretty stubborn. You mentioned 37 signals already, and they've always been a sort of inspiration in a way that you don't have to do things a traditional way. You can find your own path. And I must also say, when we started out, we were incredibly naive. That definitely more naive than we were now. And so we didn't think, like we never made a deliberate choice not to pursue funding, not because we thought they wouldn't be interested or we deliberately went that way. It just never occurred to us to look at funding, because we were just going to make a Mac app for the designers, and like what VC company would be interested in that? So this is a lot of sort of naivety and just like we just wanted to build an app, and so we started building an app, and we took it step by step from there. And you just make stuff up as you go along. And I think it helps that when neither of us is really sort of connected into we were not connected into some sort of startup bubble. We didn't have like friends who had started a business, had a successful exit, and and heard of those things from that were not obviously not based in the valley. So we're pretty isolated from what a more common path to take is, perhaps, for a traditional startup.
Which is great because like it might help to get to a certain point, but definitely you don't stand out, right? If you follow the path that everybody follows, and you end up
Indeed.
where everybody else ends up, right? But there's one thing that I really wanted to narrow in on, which is the thing about being remote, right? I mean, co-founding a company remotely must be really difficult. You have to give less explanations than other people because you didn't have investors. So it's like that wouldn't be a problem. But why did you decide that once you started hiring people not to have an office, like to hire, because I think one of your first hires was living in a small island in Scotland or something like that.
Yeah,
Right?
no, indeed. Now, when we got to maybe slightly over half a dozen people, so you ask yourself that question, like, should we, like, we seem to keep growing slowly, should we take that step now, right, to open an office? But then you look at the people who we were working with, and we knew that we would, like, at least 2 or 3 of them would definitely not be interested in moving to wherever we were going to open an office. We're definitely not going to open an office in the Outer Hebrides or somewhere else in Scotland. So that would, we knew that we would lose 2 or 3
Good
people
views,
already.
good views, though.
Yeah, the internet connectivity was a bit of an issue, I remember. It still is. But so you think, is it really worth, like, going to a location, have everybody move there, if you are pretty sure you're going to lose part of the team already, part of the small team that you've built already? And this remote thing seems to be working. It worked for Basecamp. Yeah, why not just keep doing what works? Why risk everything? Like, I mean, it was the collaboration with Emmanuel was going great, and collaboration with all the other people in the team. But the collaboration was going great, being remote. You have no idea what kind of things you're inviting into the company if you force everybody into an office. And so, why risk what is working well? And we were, I mean, I was happy working from home. Emmanuel was happy working from home. So why risk it to pursue a more sort of traditional thing?
And how about in terms of product, right? There's always this sort of fight between product managers and developers, because product managers, they want to be always in the same room, they're not remote friendly, they need to have their brainstorming sessions and so on and so forth, whereas developers are more like tech people. We like to work remotely. We're not like this bullshit of brainstorming sessions and post-its here and there and colors is like not really working for us. But
Right.
how does it turn to be in a company that's design is at your core? So you're part-time at the design company, but you're also a tech company. So how to combine them?
Right. So by sort of trade, I'm a developer. So I'm a bit of a lonely, quote unquote, guy myself. That way, like, I don't mind just to be on my own and just work. So I spent like that first version of Sketch was written only by me, with Emmanuel doing the design, and we were just constantly collaborating, exchanging ideas, and we've never sort of done any sort of high level blue sky thinking with postcards and those kind of things. It's always been a very practical approach. Quickly build something, let's try that. How does it feel? Iterate, go back to the drawing board, discuss a bit more, make a few more changes, but never sort of, okay, there's a complete blank slate. Let's really go crazy thinking up completely new ideas. We feel there's a lot of benefit in just like these quick iteration cycles with the developers going back and forth, because you can theorize as much as you want, but before you sort of have the thing in your hands, it's really hard to judge. And also, I find that you can have those sort of in-depth design discussions perfectly well over chats, over maybe better over chat than over sort of audio or video calls, because I find that it gives me more time to think. If I'm in a room with someone discussing, it feels like we're being tremendously productive. And you're all around the same whiteboard, you're frantically making notes, and everybody, oh, this is awesome, this is awesome. And so it feels very productive, but you spend at least I find that I spend so much of my attention, my energy on sort of listening to what the people say, that there is no time in between to think. And so you leave the meeting thinking, okay, this is awesome, we're going to do this. And as soon as you leave the meeting and you're back at your hotel or back at your own place thing or something, you think, well, actually, that doesn't actually work because of reasons. And I find that when you discuss things over text, you have a lot more time to think in between the conversation. You're much quicker to find the things that don't work, that sound really nice when you say them in front of a whiteboard, but don't actually work in practice. For some reasons, for me, it works much better over text. And I think I found that to be the case with many of the other people in the company as well. We do have our occasional audio and video calls, but very often design discussions are just, okay, let's do this over chat. Let's exchange screenshots. Let's open a few threads. Let's explore a bit rather than jump into a phone call.
But you will agree with me that perhaps you're biased in this answer because you're a developer, right? And so you prefer the async model, right?
Yeah, maybe, but maybe I'm biased that way, but I think it works for other designers as well. And we try before all this COVID stuff hit, we try to meet up once or twice a year with the team in person. So we've had frequent sort of whiteboard design discussions. But we always sort of find that during that time when we get together, we don't actually make the big decisions. Like we talk a lot and we seem to be making the decisions, but then later we always find that it doesn't actually work. And then
what would you do during this day? Sorry, I broke you off there.
No, you come up with, there's always a bunch of stuff that you want to talk about. So you think, okay, now we have everybody in the same room. Now let's talk about this. Let's talk about some new feature that we want to build. And you always leave the meeting with some idea, and then you always find later that it doesn't actually work. And yeah, I don't know. For us, it works. We just talk on Slack. We chat. We exchange screenshots. And I don't feel like the lack of a physical presence is really hurting us at all.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm on your side, right? But usually when I interview a lot of PMs, so product managers and people from product, and they're usually very, very, very strong, opinionated in favor of having physical meetings for these kind of product,
Yeah,
meetings.
but maybe that's because they excel at those meetings, but the rest of the team might not. We were saying that the developers might prefer slightly less sort of face-to-face intense meeting. I know plenty of developers who are less good at that kind of model, but it doesn't mean that. And so they might get less hurt at these kind of meetings, but that doesn't mean their opinion is less valid. If you have it in a format that more people are comfortable with, maybe more people would actually speak out. And so just because a PM might prefer like a Zoom call doesn't mean that the entire team should therefore jump on a Zoom call.
And how about the entire distribution of your team? Let's focus on that. Would you say that also, like, when you hire, are you looking for people who are most comfortable working in asynchronous style rather than synchronous? And perhaps that's why your product people are not so strongly opinionated for the physical meetings, or how does it go?
Oh, there are some opinions there, but I think we've always believed it's very important that you sort of design or product or whatever you call it shouldn't dictate the thing that you're building. And if you choose the format that like the product or the product manager is the most comfortable with, then you might not end up with a solution that is best for everybody. So try to find something that the entire team is comfortable with, and then conduct the meetings or the discussions that way. I've always thought that the collaborative aspect is very important. I don't want any group dictating anything to anyone else, and it's sort of our role as product people to mediate between that, not to impose our will on the rest of the group. So if nobody is comfortable in an audio chat, but we are, and therefore we dictate to the rest of the group, I think we'd get the wrong balance. As for hiring people, naturally we look for people who are like good and comfortable with this kind of asynchronous communication and are good at Slack and don't want to jump on a phone call for every little thing, because that's just not how the rest of the company operates. So that's undoubtedly a bit of a selective bias there. But I mean, we even do I have all the job interviews I've done when hiring for the company, they've always been on Slack.
Oh, wow.
It's very rare that I do a phone call with a candidate to talk to them. It's just like, well, day to day we will be talking over Slack, so let's do this interview over Slack as well to get a feeling of.
Wait. So you invite them to your Slack, or you have a Slack for hiring, and how does that work?
I mean, you can invite people to your Slack as a single channel guest or something.
Yeah.
Or like. But I think it's very, very important to interview and talk with these people in the environment that you will be talking with them day to day.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So you would have part of it's written, and then you sort of call each other, or it's all written. So how does that go? I'm very curious about it.
We've hired plenty of people that we've never seen on video or never heard on audio or never met in.
Really?
Yes.
Did that work? I mean, it seems that you're probably going to say, yeah, it's worked for the most part. But like, I presume that there might be a lot of circumstances in which you might have like false positives, right? Because then it turns out to be one person that, I don't know, for whatever reason, cannot adjust to schedules or like some formalities in the presentation or in the calls, and perhaps they're not suited to talk to, I don't know, somebody outside of the company. I don't know. Have you seen any difficulties in people that you've hired in spite of never having seen them before?
Well, you always make some mistakes when you hire people, right? I mean, in the face-to-face interview is not a guarantee either of a successful hire that will not disappoint you ever or will like.
No, you're correct. Yeah.
But no, I think our hiring ratio, sort of success versus failure ratio has been very good. Yeah, so many of the people that we only interviewed over text, we've only met them like the year after at the meetup or something like that. And many of those people, like the vast majority, are still with us. And I mean, again, I don't see anything weird about this, because they might completely dazzle you in a sort of a face-to-face Zoom interview, but if you talk to them over text all day, every day, then it doesn't matter how they present themselves on Zoom, really. Like if they like in an extreme case, they might sound amazing on Zoom, but they are not there. They can't type, and they can't
maybe
type.
They don't know how to write, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, of course it's an extreme case, but like it feels completely natural to interview people in the way that you'll be communicating with them day to day, and how they will be communicating with the rest of the team day to day.
It seems to me like the kind of companies that they would just invite the candidates for just to meet with the team, maybe have lunch with them, something like that, to see if there's some kind of bonding, right? But
well, that's a little bit hard in a remote.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't fly somebody from New Zealand to Amsterdam for lunch with you, right?
Yeah, and then it would just be lunch with me, not lunch with Emmanuel in Portugal or some designer in Germany or developer in London. Or you don't want to bring the entire team together
just for lunch,
just to see if you all like the same candidate.
Correct. Now, let's talk a little bit about culture, right? Because it seems to me that you have been learning about business or about creating a company as you went, right?
Hmm.
So, did you have an idea of the kind of culture that you wanted to have, like, kind of framed into the company, or the company created the culture, or the team created the culture? What was it like in your case?
I think it's definitely the case that the team creates the culture over time. Like the team started with just Emmanuel and me, so of course the first few hires took over our ways a bit, but over time that dilutes, and you just that dilutes so much that there's not that I think the biggest contribution there is definitely from the team as a whole. And we may have set the initial sort of few initial standards and boundaries, but I think it's definitely the team now that keeps developing the culture.
How do you pass the culture of, the founders or the first hires, even top down, to the rest of the hires, right? Because let me just say something, passing the culture on to other people in remote only environments, it's 10 times harder than being physically in the same office, right? So how do you ensure that you pass the culture on to the new hires, on to the new generation of people to come to work for Sketch?
Um, well, I don't know if it's 10 times harder than doing it in person. But I mean, we've always been very, very visible in sort of all the day-to-day operations. For example, I kept developing like basically full time for many years after Sketch release. So I had many interactions with developers and designers, and it's the same with Emmanuel. Just like every day, is sort of talking with most of the people in the company, and through that, you automatically sort of imprint the way you expect new features to be developed, the way you expect designers to work together, or just the way you expect people to conduct themselves in the chat. Like we're not the kind of distant founders that are even more distant because we are remote. I think if you're there every day, it doesn't really matter what medium you're communicating through to the rest of the team. I'm sure they will pick it up that way.
Is it something that changed fundamentally when, because at a certain point, they say culture breaks from, I think, employee number 50 onwards, right? Something like that. And you raised funding, like you had been bootstrapped, or you had been self-funded for quite a long run, maybe. And I don't know why, I haven't read about the reasons, but at a certain point you raised like a Series A of 20 million, something like that, with Benchmark. And did this have any sort of effect on the kind of people you were hiring, and the pace at which you were hiring, and how the culture was transmitted? What sort of changes did you see operationally in the company? Was it a different company day and night, or?
No, it wasn't a day and night change, but yeah, we have hired quite a few people since, and the focus of the company has changed in a way from being like purely a Mac app to now having like a very significant cloud component to it. And I mean, it sort of all overlaps time-wise, but it's not that we took investment and therefore we started to do this cloud thing, and therefore we started hiring people. These were all sort of things that were already happening, and they coincided. So yeah, there has been a change. I mean, we went from a company that was just making mostly a Mac app and sort of outsourcing part of the cloud stuff to taking everything in house and building like an entire team to build like a proper cloud companion to Sketch. That's an enormous change, and that has had its changes in the culture of the company, and sort of the team, and sort of our goals, and all of that. So there's been a change, but I think it's definitely still recognizably Sketch.
Yeah, but
And I don't
how?
know why or how, but I think so.
No, of course, and you created a solid foundation, and perhaps you didn't go to raise funds because of desperation, like most companies that they ran out of funds, right? Or
Yeah,
they're
that
not
was not the
profitable.
reason. That
That
was
that
not the
was
reason.
definitely not your case. So perhaps you had a stronger, you had a stronger position there, and you were able to maintain more and have a better, better negotiation position there. But there might be some things that might change perhaps in the decision taking processes, right? I don't know how much did you keep of that independence between you and your co-founder now with somebody else, like having a board, for instance. I don't know if you had a board before raising funds.
And we've had to formalize a few things since, but no, but we took funding. We took funding definitely not out of desperation, not because we desperately needed cash.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were in a very strong position, but we felt that we needed to take sort of the next step. We needed help with things that we were not sort of traditionally strong in, and so we approached investors, and we ended up with Benchmark. We were able to help us with some of those things we were looking for, but we didn't. They didn't come with like a long list of demands and changes and people they wanted to put in the company, or nothing like those horror stories that you've heard of, like investors come in and everything changes. No, like things changed, but we wanted them to change because we recognized that we were slowly moving from from a company that was just making a Mac app to making a Mac app with a cloud service, and that requires like sort of a different expertise. And we're moving into like different way of selling the app to a different kind of customers, like not because of the investment, but just because of the popularity of Sketch and sort of. So the product moves in a different market. You notice that the company itself grows, like we talked about. Like we went from 2 people to now we're almost 120, and somewhere halfway you realize like and you say, so what at a certain point, so you realize it's not just about making a good app anymore. Like when you're 6 people, you can just focus on, okay, what is this next version of Sketch going to be? How do we make how do we make a better app? Every version you just ask yourself, okay, what can we do to make the app even better? But at a certain point you end up with, which if you just do that long enough, you sort of accidentally build up this company behind you that becomes this big thing in itself. And so as you grow, you start to deal with so many more things than just running an app. Like you have like there's the finance side, there's the operations, there's legal, there's just keeping the company up in remote and multiple countries. It's no longer about just building an app. And so that's the stuff that's the reason we started reaching out like to people to help us with that. But yeah, so we recognized some changes had to be made, but they were not like imposed on us from outside, and that didn't ruin the culture or anything like that. It's a very long answer, but I hope it sort of answers it.
No, it is, but let's break it down in some parts. Like, there was one part that was not clear to me. It's like, so did you have a board before? Did you have advisors or somebody in the company that would help you to take decisions? Or
Nothing formalized, no.
okay,
We took the decisions together. We still take the decisions together, and so nothing has really changed in that regard. Yeah, we do have a formal board now, but
how does that feel from coming from a background of being super independent, and it's you and your co-founder, so you take 100% of the decisions, maybe based on arbitrary numbers, and you say like, oh, this year I've got more energy, let's grow on, I don't know, 30%. On maybe next year it's like, yeah, let's take it easier, let's grow only 10, right? Now you've got external people to the company, right? So do they also take part in the configuration of these goals and milestones that you need to achieve to ensure that eventually in the long run they have a return on their investment?
well, I mean, the goal with Sketch has always been to build a better product, and sort of trust that the rest of the business will take care of itself through that. And that may sound incredibly naive and and idealistic, but it's definitely true, and that is still the case. Like like all the decisions are like, what can we do to make Sketch a better product? How can we keep the customers happy, build those features that they want, and and Benchmark has full confidence in us on that. I mean, we've demonstrated that for the, I don't know, what was it, 8 years before that. So they didn't come in and started dictating things. But I must say, it has been very, very healthy as well to have sort of these regular check-ins. Okay, how are we actually doing? What are we working on? Because if you don't have some sort of regular schedule, that then it's surprising how fast time can get away from you. Working on things. So some healthy check-ins are definitely useful.
Yeah, and I think that most of the questions that one could ask any company that raised VC can be answered in this interview by saying like, look, we were already a profitable company before raising funds, so fuck it, we've done it because we could. But I'm very interested in the decision-taking process, right? Now, board aside, when you started and the first years without funding, it was you and your co-founder, right? Mm-hmm. It's a 50% split. I assume you got a 50% split in the company, or you had, right, in the beginning. But even if not, how did you decide things? So did you divide by areas, or like technology is mine, but product is yours, and like finance is yours? How did you divide it? And did you cover all the areas?
Well, we divided some things. We did some things together. I mean, I'm not a visual designer, but I have a strong opinion on design, and I think a decent feeling on how things should work. Not really how they feel, but how they work. And so Imad and I always made a good team, sort of discussing these things together, and we do that to this day. And there has never ever been a case like I have more votes than you, or like you have a higher percentage than me, or it's like, no. If the discussions would have to come down to that level, then I think we will be in serious trouble. You always just try to find the best compromise, and like sometimes you don't always agree on something, but there's always external factors to take into account, and it is like, okay, ideally we want to do this, but the technology dictates that we can only do that. So yeah, I agree with you, but there are just external limits that you have to take into account, but it's never been about percentages.
And how about
who has the final
when it's a 50%, like, you got an opinion on A and he's got B, and there's no way to reconciliate this, these two opinions, right? How would you decide? What's the decision-making process here?
This is not really formalized in any way, because it doesn't really come up that way. Like sometimes it may be like who feels the most passionate about it. Other times, like, it's more of a technological decision than designs. Like, so I understand you feel strongly, but we're going to do it this way because I understand the technology better than you, for example. But it really depends, and we've never. I mean, I've heard people talk about like, oh, it's a great thing to have 3 co-founders, because if you can't agree, you can always hold the vote, and there'll always be a winner. But no, that's not that's not how we do things.
No, but I mean, of course, like being 3, perhaps it might look better on the books, just because in theory there's no way to kind of like have a draw. But then we start doing politics. Right. And it's like, oh, maybe I talked to one of them before in a meeting to sort of like persuade him, and then he'll be on my side. So you enter in this sort of dynamics. Now, I mean, the reason I was asking this is I mean, you guys have kept the company going. You've been working for like what, 12, 13 years together, something like that, and still going on, right? How to keep the love alive with your co-founder after 10 years since the launch, right? What's the secret? Like, obviously you're very aligned in a lot of things, but there must be like 2 or 3 things you do extremely well to make that happen.
Well, just to add to the previous conversation, it's not like the decisions always end up with us two and us two fighting it out, and yeah, you win or I win. I mean, we've built this company with a team of people around us that we trust, and so it's very rare that the decision comes all the way to the top, and I feel a certain way and he feels another way. Things just get decided another way. We have the product owner on the Mac who feels very, very, very strongly on something, and while Emmanuel and I might feel one way or the other, we trust him enough to carry the decision, for example. Like, but there's a lot, the team and the people with influence are a lot bigger than us two. Keeping the love alive. I don't know. Well, for me, I mean, I can't speak for the others, but I just love just bit by bit improving something. Or like I know a couple of app developers who just can't work on the same app for more than 3 years. They get bored. They need to move on. They need to try something new. I don't have that urge at all. I love what I'm doing, and just like shaving little bits here, a little bit of polish here, a little bit of polish there, and over the years, just seeing the program evolve. I think that's immensely satisfying.
That helps you to yourself. It seems to me that's something that it's one of your strengths, as in how to keep your love for the company alive. But the relationship with a co-founder, I mean, it's always got like ups and downs, right? And even if it's always good, like there must be something that you proactively do, like, hey, let's go for, I mean, I think you mentioned that you meet with your team once or twice a year. You might meet your co-founder more often, or you might take like several, I don't know if you take like coaching or something like that, if you ever need it. No. Like, is there anything that you do in specific to maintain that relationship alive and healthy?
I don't know. I know we don't do anything special to keep that. We don't.
You never fought. You never fought, right?
Yeah. No. Of course, we have. Have disagreements sometimes stronger than others. Maybe it helps that we are remote. Like, I'm in the Netherlands. He is still in Portugal. So if we're just fed up with each other for a while, we don't need to. We don't need to be in the same room. We don't bump into each other all the time. Like, being remote helps you also keep distance. Maybe that's what that has helped keep it going. Of course, I don't know, because we've never worked in an office together. But maybe that has a part to play. I don't know.
So maybe you're still keeping it alive because you don't meet very often.
Maybe, who knows? Who knows?
Maybe that would be the secret to keeping a lot of marriages alive as well. No, but like on the like conversely, like while that might be a really good thing, you don't meet that often, therefore there's less friction. You don't meet on the bad days. You can always switch it off. Like, today I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm just like doing async stuff and all of that. Mm-hmm. And you don't bring it on to the other people, your frustrations or whatever. Maybe some people bring their bad feelings into the office, and that creates a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, because you don't meet that often, I don't know how you deal with this, but like interactions are very meaningful when you have them in person. At least that's what happens with me and my co-founders, right? But online are sort of like not motivating. I mean, if we take a meeting online, it's like, yeah, whatever. Like, it doesn't give me an adrenaline boost. But when we meet in person with my co-founders, like, wow, yeah, now that was a real meeting. I don't know why. Is this something, or am I just projecting here?
I don't feel the same way as you do. It doesn't really matter whether we have the meeting in person or not. It's more about how the meeting went, the contents of it. Whether we decided something really important or exciting, it's not doesn't really matter where or how we do it. to
And
me.
how about the relationship with the investors? I mean, probably it's very easy to explain that you raise funding with them because they are you were a profitable company and therefore they had like either to accept it or But the fact that you're a really an extremely remote company, that's usually not a very not a very good thing for investors who don't understand remote, who don't understand async. Have you been doing some sort of like, how do you explain that? How did you explain to them? Did
Oh,
they understand it?
there was no need to explain it to them at all. They loved the idea, and they like the fact that we are a remote company. They fully support us in that. So this was not this was not anything we had to pitch at all.
No, right. And between the employees, like one of the that's also I wanted to ask you about very specifically is one of the cons about being remote. Like I'm just highlighting the cons because the pros we already know them, and we at least at MarsBased we're 100% remote, so we've been talking about the pros of being remote for many
Mm-hmm.
years. So therefore, let's focus on the hard truths, right? And one
Yeah,
of
okay.
them is it's difficult to sort of identify when somebody's having a problem, right? Issues, work issues or personal issues, because you don't see them in the office. You don't see when they're frowning, when they're like, like this in the office. And how do you deal with this? How do you deal with these kind of issues in the company if you ever had one?
Well, you get to know people pretty well when you talk to them every day over Slack, and you can just tell by the way they're writing something whether something is up or not. Emmanuel is especially good at it. He knows immediately when I've got something on my mind that I'm not feeling like. I'm trying not to show it, but he knows. I don't know how he does it, but he just knows by the way I type. Maybe it's extra short sentences or differences in punctuation, but it's all the subtle things somehow that you pick up face to face for sure. But you can also pick them up over text. He definitely can. I'm not as good at it as he is, but you can definitely tell when you start to know people better.
And is it something, because one of the things you identified is not, you're right, you're 100% right. You can tell by the way they type or the way
Yeah.
they look in the video calls, right? There's something else, and I'd like to ask your opinion about. Have you got like strict working schedule, or everybody works in different times, or whatever schedule you might have? How does it work in the company?
We generally try to keep people sort of on a 9 to 5, in whatever the local time zone is. We like the fact that this makes it predictable for everybody to sort of be able to know like when you can approach someone, when you need something from them. But I think it's also a um, very healthy thing to communicate to the rest of the team. Like, just because you are 3 hours before most of your team doesn't mean you have to wake up extra early, or doesn't mean you have to stay up extra late just so that you overlap hours. Like, we want everybody to work reasonable hours for our benefit and theirs.
Okay.
And I think that seems to be working well.
That's I wanted to ask you precisely that, because my as a follow-up to this and circling back to the previous point is we have detected over the years that when somebody has got issues, you can tell like some weeks before, because of their schedule changing every day. Like every day they have something, right? Every day is like, today I need to take care of my mom, tomorrow is my dog, then I need to
Yeah.
swap my Wednesday for my Saturday. Then when this dynamic starts, and it's hard to stop it, or if you don't see it in time, like it seems to develop that person is strongly correlated to having issues with work or with personal. Is that something you identified as well, or is there any other way you can tell?
Yeah, no, those patterns are definitely there, and yeah, you notice it in all manner of things. Uh, Most of them probably more subtle than just radically different work hours. But no, I still maintain that you can tell. You can tell most of the time. There's something up with someone.
Perfect. Just to wrap things up, I'd like to ask a couple quick questions. Well, the first one is, we like people to talk about books or some sort of inspiration you had. Is there somebody you look up to? You mentioned Basecamp. We already know them. We talk pretty much in every episode. We've mentioned Basecamp and 37 Signals. Is there somebody that you have as a reference, as a like some sort of inspiration, people you look up to, or any book that you might recommend to, a technical audience that we've got in this podcast?
Oh dear, you should have told me to prepare for this.
We don't prepare here.
Yeah, I could have looked up something. Now I don't know. You mentioned Basecamp Basecamp comes up a lot. So I won't repeat that one.
Maybe something related to design, because if you're a developer but you get a good eye on design, you're extremely rare, right? maybe that's why you're successful as a company, because you don't come across these kind of people.
Yeah. No, let me think a bit. I mean, we probably I don't know how many people you interview that have basically mostly are dedicated so many years to just building a native Mac app, like we're sort of Apple
No,
fans.
at all. You're the first.
Okay, very good. I mean, we started building this Mac app not because we deliberately chose the Mac as the platform where all the designers are, even though they luckily are there. But just because we have Apple stuff, we love Apple stuff, we love their design, we love their hardware, their software. I started programming for the Mac because I really liked the language, the frameworks, design philosophy. So I always looked very, very closely at how Apple would do things, what would like some of the great apps that Apple has shipped over the years. Like how would they have done this in that version of Keynote? What is sort of the Apple way of doing things? So like a very close study of anything Apple has always been like a source of inspiration there. Not sure I can recommend a specific book, but
no worries. And last question, it's a signature question of the podcast, is can you share your biggest tech fuck up, and if possible quantify it in how much money you squandered on that one?
Oh God, this is another one you should have asked me about.
Why not? Because of the finance, or I mean,
no, but
definitely.
No, I would have had more time to think about this to prepare. No, I think I wouldn't call it a fuck up, but we
needs to be a fuck up. Needs to be something that we can learn from.
A fuck up. Okay, well, so we released the first version of Sketch that Emmanuel and I released 2012. We gave ourselves 7 months to build this thing. I sort of an artificial deadline to meet the Apple Design Awards for 2012. And when the application was released, it was not ready. It was most definitely not ready. And so we spent the next sort of year and a half digging myself out of a technical dead hole.
Oh, wow.
That I thought we were never going to emerge from at a certain point, because we had this version 1 of Sketch. It was a very simple drawing app, and any sort of proper planning of a version 2 that should have had like more advanced capabilities and more demands thrown at it would have started with, okay, we need some architectural redesign before we throw more features into it. And so but we first threw more and more features into it. We got a lot more customers that were all screaming about like bugs in the undo system and performance. And like we were doing all our drawing on the main thread, like a big thing you don't want to do. And so we spent the next year and a half digging ourselves out. And I'm very happy we made that. But that was not the given upfront. So it's not a fuck up as per se, but it was a pretty big thing that we might not have emerged from if things went a little bit different.
Is it because, like, when you say it was not ready, it's because of that deadline you had to leave some things uncoded or untested, or
we it's basically just the time limit that we had to build the features that we wanted, there was just no time to fundamentally rethink how the application was built. We took this very first version and just built the rest on top. And you can sort of still see that into this day. Like, I think any sort of mature application has those things. Like, okay, if we knew back then what we know now, we would have done it in a very different way. But the first 2-3 years of Sketch were like that, multiplied by I don't know how much, but it was tough. It was tough.
All right, I think we can wrap it up here. Any last words, anything you want to share with our audience with regards to Sketch, what's coming out next, or something you want to give out some sort of advice?
Well, we're really, I mean, at the beginning, I talked about the upcoming update, I think 69, with a big focus on components and design and system. Is going to be a really great update. Really looking forward to that. By the time people hear this, it's probably come out. And we're probably working on the collaborative editing update, which is also going to be awesome. Really excited about those. This has been a long time in the making, and I can't wait to launch it.
Perfect. Thank you, Val, Pieter, and thank you, everybody.
Pleasure.